I'm Julian Porter, the curator of Bexhill Museum, and I'm going to talk to you about the Maharaja of Cooch Behar and Bexhill. Probably one of the most popular stories regarding Bexhill on Sea, certainly a story that has generated a lot of local legends and mythology. So that's what we are going to be trying to tease apart, because the Maharaja and his family were certainly here, but some of the things that they did or supposedly did, some of that is strictly in the realm of folklore. So we're having a look here at the wonderful coat of arms of Cooch Behar with the lion and the elephant. And I suppose an obvious question to ask is, where is Cooch Behar? So today it would be in West Bengal. So I've marked that on red, just showing whereabouts in India we're talking about. And from the collection, I found an old map of Kamarupa and Cooch Behar. So there's a contemporary map of the area. So it's quite difficult to spot Cooch Behar on a modern map, but it is definitely there. So here is the Maharaja Nripendra and his wife Suniti Devi on one of their many journeys to England, mostly associated with big royal events, funerals and coronations. So this is probably 1902 when they're coming over for the coronation of Edward VII. And here he is. The Maharaja was the ADC to the king, and they were very close. They were close to all the royals. So that's the Maharaja on his horse, furthest away, I was going to say from the camera, furthest away from the artist in this illustration from 1902. So Bexhill, sunny Bexhill, shown here with a very strongly Orientalist seafront. This is the architectural style that we preferred to build up until we took on the international modernism with the Delaware Pavilion in 1935. But certainly from 1896 through to 1911, most of our seafront architecture was strongly Orientalist. So we are here in Marina Court Avenue. So part of this area used to be described as Little India. And here is 22 Marina Court Avenue. This is the bungalow closest to the Colonnade and Delaware Pavilion site. And this, unfortunately, is where the Maharaja Nripendra, Maharaja of Cooch Behar, died on the 18th of September 1911. So a very important date in the history of Bexhill, but also causing lots and lots of tales about what was going on in Bexhill at this time. So another obvious question to ask is, where is Bexhill? Well, if you go south, keep going south until you hit the sea, that's where we're located. On this chart of the town, this is a sketch map from about 1926. I've indicated some of the locations closely associated with the Maharaja and his family. So 22 Marina Court Avenue is there. The Sackville Hotel, where the Maharani sometimes stayed, is there. We have the Kurzall site, the old pavilion. We have the roller skating rink, which is a little known feature of Old Bexhill, was located there. The railway station site, so the funeral procession from the Maharaja went from 22 Marina Court Avenue up Devonshire Road to, well, actually not all the way to the railway station. They actually put the coffin on board the sidings there where the old railway station used to be. And just over in Edgerton Park, that is the site that the Memorial Fountain. The Memorial Fountain was built here at the Colonnade site in 1913, and it was relocated in 1934 to the Edgerton Park site, not too far away from the museum. So the associations between Cooch Behar and Bexhill are well known, and not just in the town. So this is the 1954 poem by John Betjeman, Original Sin on the Sussex Coast, which mentions the copper domes of Cooch Behar. So although Bexhill is not mentioned in the poem, the street names and locations make it clear that this poem is set in Bexhill, referencing the copper domes of Cooch Behar. So the Orientalist look of Bexhill Seafront has confused many people. This was a bandstand built on West Parade in about 1900. Again, strongly Orientalist. And this, unfortunately, this is from 1977, just it was about to be demolished. So this is the Bexhill Observer cutting from the 9th of July, 1977, which informs us the Maharajah of Cooch Behar built a fanciful shelter, pictured above, opposite the West Parade clock tower. His aim was for the ladies of his entourage to enjoy the sea air away from the common gaze of the local populace. None of this is true. The Maharaja and his family were here, but they didn't build anything on Bexhill Seafront apart from the memorial fountain in 1913. Orientalism is introduced to Bexhill in 1896 when the 8th Earl Delaware builds the Curzon on the seafront. So this is where the Bexhill Sailing Club is located today. Originally intended to be a pier, only the landward section was ever constructed. So this was a theatre with restaurants and reading rooms attached. They never quite got round to extend it out to sea. The business model of early Bexhill, Earl Delaware's business model, was to try and get very wealthy people to come to Bexhill instead of the south of France. We didn't bother competing with Hastings and Eastbourne. They were decidedly down market. We were taking on the Côte d'Azur. So Nice was the model for Bexhill. And I think the idea of a pier was a slight worry that day trippers might get on a steamer and come across from Hastings and Eastbourne and rub up against our very, very wealthy visitors. So that wasn't considered a very good thing. So this is our first of about 9 attempts to build a pier. None of them ever got off the ground. So a very beautiful building, described as Moorish. That's how they described it. So we have this mixture of North African and Indian influences coming in. And I think the Maharaja of Cooch Behar would have been quite entertained to see this fanciful architecture on Bexhill Seafront. This shows the Curzon with the telegraph kiosk outside and the bandstand just beyond it. The bandstand is now a shelter. Unfortunately, the telegraph kiosk is now gone. And the Delaware Gates. The Delaware Gates were built in 1895 and they were demolished in 1913, so no longer then. This just marks where the Delaware estate began, because this was a private road owned by Earl Delaware, which is why he was able to have the first motor car races here in 1902. Moving along from the colonnade, we have the Marina Court Avenue, we have Channel View. This is a building known as the Cairo. So we can see the Cairo here in the foreground and the Curzon is in the distance there. And the Orientalist trend culminates in the building of Central Parade in 1910 and the Colonnade the following summer in 1911. So this is a wonderful bandstand and the 2 cupolas of the Colonnade. So Earl Brassey is in the bandstand there, officially opening the Colonnade in July 1911. This is a view of the site where the Delaware Pavilion now stands. On the left, we can see Marina Court Avenue. So the last bungalow there is number 22, where the Maharaja of Cooch Behar died. The Colonnade just beyond. So the opening of the Colonnade actually coincides with the convalescence of the failed convalescence of the Maharaja of Cooch Behar in the bungalow. And apparently he contributed to the band fund. So I don't know whether that was sort of a bung to get them to shut up because he wasn't feeling very well. But he participated as best he could, and the family certainly entered into town life. On the right, we can see the Metropole Hotel. In front of that is the old Coast Guard station, and a little stage there is an open-air entertainment area known as the Lawn, and the Coronets are performing there. So this is not drone footage here, but we're high up in the air where the Delaware Pavilion car park was extended. There used to be a huge apartment block called Marina Court, which was opened in 1900 and demolished in 1970s. That's where Marina Court Avenue gets its name from, this huge apartment block, which is long gone. A 1950s view. So the Coast Guard cottages have gone, but the Delaware Pavilion and one of its early bandstands has appeared. The Colonnade bandstand has disappeared. That goes just after the war. But Marina Court Avenue is still there. And it just looks like somebody's repairing the roof in this photograph. This is one of Frank Sherwin's railway posters. So it's a Southern Railway poster advertising Bexhill on Sea. It's one of my favourite views of the Delaware Pavilion. The strapline was Bexhill on the sunny Sussex coast, and I think it's quite ironic that they chose a nighttime view to illustrate this. But you can see the colonnade, you can see the rowing club boathouse, and you can just see the corner of Marina Court Avenue 22 there showing up in the frame. We have a permanent display about the Maharajah of Cooch Behar and his family in the museum. This developed out of the temporary exhibition that we put on in 1998. So this is a potted biography of Maharaja Nripendra and the Maharani Suniti Devi. So at the bottom of this, it mentions one of the other local legends about Marina Court Avenue being built as a seraglio for the Maharaja's harem. And the story goes on to say that each bungalow had a different doorknob, so the Maharaja would remember which wife was behind each door. So quite convenient. Unfortunately, absolutely none of this was true. Marina Court Avenue was built by the same developers that built the Granville Hotel and Sea Road. And again, just in seafront Orientalist style architecture. So I think that the Maharaja would have been quite entertained by this style of architecture on Bexhill seafront, but he was just a tenant. He was just staying there. So look at Maharaja Nripendra in all his finery here, and Suniti Devi. So a very handsome couple, very well known in England, very well known and well thought of in Bexhill. So we'll have a quick look at the it's rather complicated, but actually simplified family tree. So we have Nripendra and Suniti Devi at the top. We have their children, and we've just dropped down, so mustn't miss out Jitendra. He's there with his wife Indira and their children. So order of succession, we have Nripendra, we have Rajendra as Maharaja after him, but unfortunately he dies in 1913. Then we have Jitendra as Maharaja of Cooch Behar from 1913. The men in the family were surprisingly short-lived. Some of the ladies did rather better. We've got some rather long-lived ladies. Suniti Devi lived to 68. Poor old Nripendra was 49 when he died in Bexhill, but he did rather better than most of his sons. His son Rajendra was only 31 when he died. So we have some wonderful photographs. When we did the exhibition, we were very kindly given a number of family photographs. So Diana Garnham gave us this photograph of Nripendra in slightly more casual wear here. And here he is in full dress uniform. This is from Vanity Fair, 26th of December, 1901. And a photograph here, this is 1908. So he was a military gentleman. He was also a very keen sportsman, very many different sports, and this included big game hunting back in Cooch Behar. There's a very strong association between Bexhill and health. This is the Metropolitan Convalescent Home that was built on the brow of Bexhill Old Town in 1881. And in many ways, this may have been the catalyst for the 7th Earl Delaware developing Bexhill on Sea as a resort. Before that, it was fairly marginal farmland. The Earl wasn't making very much money from Bexhill. 1891, the Metropolitan Convalescents Association bought this land. So I think he realized that there was money to be made in developing Bexhill. And they wanted this location because of Bexhill's long-standing reputation as being a very, very healthy place, not just because of the fresh air and sea breezes, but also because of the properties of the water. Bexhill's early days, we almost developed as a spa town, and what they described as the chalybeate springs, this rather rusty water that naturally occurs in Bexhill, was considered by the Victorians to be very, very good for you. So convalescence is a big part of Bexhill, and this is why one of the reasons why the Maharaja was here in 1911. He was unwell, and his doctor recommended that he come and stay in Bexhill to recover himself. And here's the exception that proves the rule. Everyone else is fine, everyone else recovers. Unfortunately, the Maharaja is slightly too far gone and doesn't recover, but everybody else was fine. Bexhill is very, very good view. But the family had been associated with Bexhill for a long time before that. This is the Bexhill Regatta of 1901. And if we just zoom in a little bit here, we can see Suniti Devi with Lady Mary Sackville. So this is one of the 7th Earl's daughters. This is the sister of the 8th Earl Delaware. She was considered to be the very fashionable member of the Delaware family, and behind her, sitting there, is Suniti Devi. So the family are around a long time before the Maharaja's convalescence in Bexhill, so they knew this area. We see here from this cutting from the Bexhill Chronicle, this is 28th of September 1901, that the Maharani attends a performance at the Kursaal, the Earl's entertainment pavilion on the seafront, and guest of Mr. and Mrs. E.J. Pape. The Pape family lived at Moor Hall in Ninfield. They were very close friends to the Maharaja. In fact, his younger son became the private secretary of the Maharaja of Cooch Behar. So they know a local family. So the Maharani in 1901 and family essentially take over Moor Hall and use this as a local base. So this becomes a holiday home for them in the area. So this is the Bexhill Chronicle. This is the 15th of June 1901. So a very long description of the Maharani and her family staying at Moor Hall. The Maharaja isn't there all the time. I think he's coming home, but he's mostly spending his time doing royal duties in London. So for those of you not familiar with the area, we have Bexhill on sea, on the coast, and a little bit further inland is Ninfield. So they are staying at a large house, Moor Hall. So these are some postcards from about 1910, 1912, showing a rather nice house, which unfortunately no longer exists. All this has been cleared and redeveloped, but this is where the Maharaja and family were staying in Ninfield. Very nice too. When we were researching the exhibition in 1998, we came across various stories of a young girl, possibly a princess, possibly a Cooch Behar, drowning in the pond at Ninfield, which was a rather shocking story, but we counted up all our princesses and all were accounted for at the end. So it clearly can't be one of our girls there. So whether anyone did drown in the pond, but again, it just seems to be another legend that springs up around the family. Again, very, very nice. And they've got a dome on it as well. So again, a little bit like Bexhill Seafront. So this is the Bexhill Observer, 14th September 1901. All sorts of interesting things going on locally, but the thing listed there at the bottom is the Maharani is having a party and Prince Ranjit Singh is invited down to stay. So friends turning up as well, and he is captain of the Sussex cricket team at the time. So they play the local cricket team. So lots of fun and games going on at Moor Hall at this time. So we're moving forward. This is the Bexhill Observer, the 9th of September 1911. And this is the white costume skating carnival at Bexhill roller skating rink. So this is the time when the Maharaja is very, very poorly at 22 Marina Court Avenue, but his children are joining in local events. So in the middle of the lineup there, we can see Princess Sudhira, so joining in the fun at the roller skating carnival. And there is roller hockey going on there as well. And we have the Princes Hitendra and Prince Jitendra there as well. So a lot of integration between the family. They didn't stay aloof. The Maharaja is really too poorly at this stage to get very involved, but the children are certainly there joining in the festivities in the town. And I think this is one of the reasons that Bexhill really took them to their heart. Also, they're very, very wealthy, so it was probably considered a good move to keep on their side as well. Very, very famous, very, very well connected. So this is a postcard. This will be from the summer of 1911. 1911. The colonnade is just open, so this is just a very early photograph of it. So there's a deck here, and we're actually seeing what appears to be some of the members of the Maharaja's staff pacing around, just missing that big woolly dog there, sitting on the colonnade deck. Behind that, you can see the rowing clubhouse, boathouse, and behind that 22 Marina Court Avenue. So in there is the ailing Maharaja of Cooch Behar. So it's just remarkable that just randomly members of his staff are caught in this postcard. And a view describing it as the Sun Parade, which is not a title we use very much, but they are the very, very nice bungalows along Bexhill Seafront. And sadly, here is a photograph from the family. We see the coffin of the Maharaja of Cooch Behar lying in state in number 22. So he dies on the 18th of September, 1911. And this is cutting from the Bexhill Observer, the 25th of November, 1911, where there is a letter retrieved from the Maharaja's waste paper bin back in Cooch Behar, where he writes a little poem, right? Slightly sort of a morbid poem, if that's the right word to use, clearly suggesting that he's thinking about the sort of end of his life. So he clearly not very well, and is sort of dwelling on his mortality. When the Maharaja of Cooch Behar died, the king commanded that there would be a military funeral. So this is really Bexhill's only state occasion. So this was very well covered by the newspaper, and the set of photographs here, postcards by the local photographer Emil Wieler. I think one of the first things to say about this image is that there's very little in it that you can actually see today. So it's quite disorientating. This is Marina Court Avenue, so we're just outside the bungalows there. But if we were on that site today, this would look completely different. Marina Court, that big building that dominates the background, is no longer there. That would be the Delaware Pavilion car park. And in the distance to the left, we're still seeing the Coast Guard cottages and the Metropole behind. We would now be looking at the Delaware Pavilion there. So there's a gun carriage with the Maharaja's funeral, the Maharaja's coffin on it. And here we have the sons, the princes, leading the funeral procession there. So that is Prince Rajendra leading the procession. The family were later very impressed by the send-off that they were given by the town. The town centre essentially came to a halt during the proceedings. The shops along Devonshire Road closed and all the blinds came down. So there's just coming into end of Devonshire Road here, coming to Devonshire Square, and the coffin being loaded onto a special train at Bexhill railway station. So this is the siding just coming off of Devonshire Square. And the newspapers covering the event. So there's some slightly different photographs in here. So this is Bexhill Observer of the 23rd of September, 1911. So we can see the next Maharaja, Rajendra, and the younger sons following on behind. Coming into Devonshire Square with the gun carriage. And slightly out of sequence here, this is the coffin coming out of 22 Marina Court Avenue, just going past the rowing club's boathouse there. And this is Bexhill railway station. So that is the mayor shaking hands with Rajendra. Again, things looking a little bit different in the background because we can see the very ornate facade of the railway station's taxi ranks in the background. I think in the background here, this is Dr. Sen. This would be the Maharaja's brother-in-law. That was the brother of Suniti Devi. So seeing everybody off here. And then salute to the departing train up to London. So this was just the first part of the funeral procession. The train then went up to London, and the funeral procession continued till Golders Green, where the cremation took place, and then the Maharaja's ashes returned to Cooch Behar. And the story is that when his ashes returned to Cooch Behar, all the elephants cried. So again, maybe they did, Maybe they didn't, but it's a brilliant story. So more newspaper coverage. So there's the council's vote of condolence and a letter of appreciation from the next Maharaja, Rajendra, there. And gifts were distributed. The bearers and the drivers were all given these little gold-plated medals. So again, another reason why the family were very, very popular in the town. They were very, very generous. And the memorial plate was a gold plate, was presented to the town council. So that is now part of the town plate. And we're looking at the Bexhill Observer, 14th of October, 1911. So more gifts being distributed. This time, wristwatch, gold wristwatches being given out. More gifts coming to Bexhill. So in addition to the £100 which the Maharaja forwarded to the mayor for distribution for charities, further proof of His Highness's appreciation of Bexhill's sympathy. So other slightly strange things going on. Indian Prince's Affairs. This is the Bexhill Observer of the 2nd of September 1911. And it looks like the Maharaja, the Prince Jitendra is running out of cash at this time. The affairs of Prince Jitendra of Cooch Behar, described as of address at Porchester Gate, came before the London Bankruptcy Court on Tuesday. So he's run out of money, but somehow he comes up with the money and the debts are paid in full. So that's the end of that case. There's always a question of whether the Maharaja's family were living beyond their means, whether they were quite as wealthy as they were made out. I think they certainly have cash flow problems from time to time. And again, exceptionally generous to Bexhill, so I guess that could be part of the problem. So back in Cooch Behar, this is the palace, not looking Orientalist, thoroughly neoclassical palace back in Cooch Behar. This is the investiture of Prince Rajendra, so he becomes the next Maharaja of Cooch Behar. And here he is outside the palace in Cooch Behar. And we found this photograph. It's a very young Rajendra here, and it's by a Bexhill photographer. So John Hicks, who was based in Devonshire Road. We think that the Maharaja's family at this time were visiting Eastbourne. Certainly one of the daughters was at school at Eastbourne, which explains the connection. There's another small lad in a sailor's suit and a little woolly dog there. Possibly the lad is a member of the Pape family. Pape family seem to be the ones that they're closest to in Bexhill, but we're seeing here connections going back to the 1890s. And here he is, all grown up, looking magnificent here as Maharaja of Cooch Behar. So again, a photograph from the family, just described as Uncle Raji here. But sadly, he didn't outlive his father for long. The story, and I think a lot of this is a story rather than historical fact, is that the Maharaja Rajendra wanted to marry Edna May, the Belle of New York, but he wasn't allowed to, so he drank himself to death on champagne in Cromer. He certainly dies in Cromer in 1913. But how much Edna May has to do with this is difficult to say. The story is rather good. This idea that they wanted to get married, they weren't allowed to, so he commits suicide via champagne. Another problem may well have been that Edna May is already married. So I think the likelihood of them get married was very, very slight. Interestingly, we do know that Edna May is in Bexhill at about the right time. So this is the Bexhill Chronicle. This is the 29th of March 1902. We know that Edna May is staying at Edna May and party is staying at the Metropole Hotel. This is the 5th of April 1902, and Earl Delaware, Mr. E.J. Pape again, blah, 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 and Miss Edna May were amongst the first nighters who witnessed Mr. Glover's A General Joke at the Kursaal on Saturday last. So Edna May is at the Kursaal, Pape family attending. All these people know each other, so they probably met. I think it's probably fair to say that Rajendra probably met or saw Edna May. how much more there is to it, it's difficult to say. Clearly, something is wrong with this story. She couldn't have married him even if she wanted to. So we have the Bexhill Chronicle. This is the 6th of September, 1913, sadly reporting the death of Rajendra at the age of 31. So the men of the family are not long-lived. So we have a repeat here from Cromer. So the body goes to Golders Green, there's cremation, and then the ashes go back to Cooch Behar. So our friend Uma Kant very kindly tracked down some photographs from Cromer of the funeral procession there, not on the same scale as Bexhill, the late Maharaja of Cooch Behar, poor old Rajendra here. But this idea of romance within the family and sort of failed loves is very much part of the mythology. But there seemed to be problems in love with a number of members of the family. There was difficulty between Nrpendra getting permission to marry so it's Nrpendra Snusivi. So this would be Jitendra marrying Indira. That was opposed by the family in Baroda, but they eventually persuaded them to get married. So at about the same time that poor old Maharaja Rajendra is dying, Maharaja Jitendra gets married to Indira of Baroda. So we're jumping forward to 1930, back at the palace at Cooch Behar. This is the investiture of Maharaja Jitendra. So reporting here Jitendra's marriage to Indira. And here they are together. I think this is probably in Calcutta. This is the time of the wedding, so 1913 here. So Jit and Indira in 1914, a lovely portrait of them both together. So, of course, with the memorial fountain that was donated to the town, it should have been Maharaja Rajendra opening this up. But, of course, he had just died, so it falls to the next Maharaja, Maharaja Jitendra. So here he is with Indira at the colonnade, just about to open the only structure that the family provided in the town. So here he is with the mayor. That's Mayor Daniel Mayor, who's a very interesting character in his own right. As well as being mayor of Bexhill, he was a theatrical agent. So he was the agent for the ballerina Pavlova. So he was very well connected, very well traveled chap, but that's a whole different story. And here we see Maharaja Jitendra turning on the memorial fountain. And we've got some postcards of the same event here. So it is the 18th of September 1913, so the same date 2 years on after the death of the Maharaja. So more of, well, this would be Herbert Wheeler's photograph, because poor old Emil Wheeler dies in 1912, so this is son Herbert taking over. So the postcard of the fountain being turned on. And this is the tea party that they had back in the colonnade afterwards. So this is the very fine memorial to the Maharaja, paid for by the family. This was made out of Royal Dalton tiles, and there's a little inscription there thanking the town for their kindness when the first Maharaja died. So this is the only thing that they built in the town, and it's not Orientalist. So again, a little bit more neoclassical architecture. So this is the old Coast Guard station site just behind the colonnade, so very close to where the Maharaja died, which I guess is one of the reasons the site was chosen. It also would have been a very prominent position on the seafront. So prominent that in 1935 we built the Delaware Pavilion there, which was a slight problem that we just put in this lovely memorial fountain. So here we see the lie of the land. There is the memorial fountain. This is a postcard from about 1920. So we have the colonnade, we have 22 Marina Court Avenue, and this is where the Delaware Pavilion ends up. So if you zoom forward to about 1936, go back again, we've got a bit of a problem that the lovely memorial fountain is slightly in the way. I guess it would actually be sort of roughly on the terrace, so they probably could have left it there, but they didn't want to do that. So in 1934, when the whole site is cleared, the memorial fountain is literally picked up and carted off to Edgerton Park. And we're very lucky that from the archives that we have a series of photographs showing this work. So there it is, being sort of packaged up, put on a little trolley, and then dragged down Edgerton Road and dropped down in Edgerton Park. And this is by the ramp down from Edgerton Road. So we have the clinic on one side, the ramp going down. And you can still see the sort of layout today of where the memorial fountain would have been. There's a little sort of garden area with a seat there, which would have gone with this. That's all survived. Sadly, the memorial fountain, as I'm sure you're well aware, is no longer there, is no longer in existence. This is the last image that I have found of the memorial in Edgerton Park, and this is from 1963. One of the descriptions we found described it being frost damage. It doesn't look too bad. I think we've got a little bit missing off the corner. So I guess it's really from health and safety reasons, if they had health and safety back in 1963, they decided that this needed to be fixed. Now, the story we were told is that it was removed to Bexhill Cemetery to be repaired. So if it does exist, it's somewhere in the grounds of Bexhill Cemetery. It's certainly not upstanding in it because one of our cemetery walks would have picked up on it. Thinking about it, if it was just a question of repairing it, I would have thought that they would have done that in situ. I don't think they would have moved it. So whether things got slightly complicated, there was an idea to move it to the cemetery, so it would act as a sort of a memorial in the cemetery, and then something went wrong and it was further damaged, or it fell to bits when they tried to transport it. We really don't know. So there's a huge mystery surrounding what happened to the Maharaja's memorial fountain. So going back here, this is Bexhill Observer, 8th of January 1916, and just reporting that the Maharaja Jitendra has had an heir. A son and heir has been born to the Maharaja and Maharani of Cooch Behar. So this is the 1913 photograph. So this would be Jagadnarpendra. This would be their first son. Better known as Baya, we've got some photographs here of him all grown up. Again, these are photographs coming from the Maharaja's family. And here we have Mum, we have Indira there. And if you're going to have a family portrait, do it like this. So we have Indira there back in Cooch Behar with her sons Jagadrapendra and Indrajapendra there. The Maharaja, original Maharaja Narendra, wrote a book in 1909 describing Cooch Behar and his big game shooting activities there. So we have a good description of the state of Cooch Behar in his own words. The state is about 1,300 square miles, which forms a plain of almost triangular shape covered with a network of rivers, streams and marshes. So a lovely description of Cooch Behar there. And some amazing photographs, early photographs. So I guess this is probably about 1902. It might be as late as 1909, may go with the book. And we can see Suniti Devi there, and there is the Maharaja of Cooch Behar having a little drink there. And famous for its elephants, for these sort of big game shooting parties. So I won't show you any photographs of any poor dead tigers, but this is the sort of thing that they were getting up to, one of his interests. And we can have a little bit look around the magnificent palace at Cooch Behar. So some wonderful photographs of the house, dining room, drawing room, library, beautiful library there. And this is one of Umakant's photographs, took this in 2013. When we did the exhibition back in 1998, the castle, the palace was in very poor condition. It was almost a ruin, but fortunately, the government had fully restored it. So it's back to its full glory now. This is not the palace at Cooch Behar. This is their house at Calcutta. This is Woodlands. And one of the Maharajas, original Maharaja's interest was motor racing. So I guess maybe that was something that put Bexhill on the map for him as well. He had lots and lots of cars. So we have got, here we've got Rajendra and Victor here. So we've got some of the boys in the cars. And we're jumping forward here to 1932. So this is the Bexhill Observer, 19th of November, 1932. And sadly, the Maharani Suniti Devi has died. So she did rather better than her husband. He was 49 when he died. Suniti Devi was 68. So she had a much longer life. A very remarkable woman, in many ways more remarkable than the Maharaja himself. So she was a great philanthropist. She did a lot of things to help her people out in Cooch Behar and was very well thought of. Her father, Chesab Sen, was a remarkable man. He created the Brahmo Samaj religion. This was an idea to bring religious groups together. So it didn't have any religious iconography. So they took out all the things that might cause dissension to try and bring people together to sort of create a sort of a religion that everybody could sign up to. And it's a religion that Suniti Devi really devoted the latter parts of her life to. So here she is, the 5 daughters of Chesab Chunda Sen. So we have Suniti Devi on the left there. And here she is, well, in court dress on the left and right in later life. So we see her here with her granddaughter, Geeta. So that's the daughter of Princess Sudhira. So the project with Wittick Manor and the Manda family really tie in with the princesses Pratibha and Sudhira, and Princess Sudhira was better known as Granny Manda after her husband, Mr. Manda. So this is their daughter, Geeta, and we can see Sunita Devi, probably with Geeta. There's 2 daughters, Geeta and Garba. I'm not entirely sure which one this is, and here she is, probably back in 1902, maybe later 1910, in her royal gear. So this is probably coming over for one of the big state occasions in England. And a photograph I don't have much information of. It is definitely Suniti Devi. She's in London. It's not Bexhill, and it is about 1911. We don't have any record of any of the princesses in Bexhill for the funeral there, so it's likely that they joined the funeral procession from London. I don't know whether this is the funeral of her husband, but given that her sons were not very long-lived, this might be from the funeral of Maharaja Rajendra. So she saw a lot of tragedy in her life. Moving on to the other sons, this is Victor. So this was the younger son to Jitendra. And unfortunately, he doesn't live a very long life. He dies at 44, so he's killed crossing the road. So it's a motor car accident. So this is the Bexhill Observer, the 6th of November 1937. So he's only 44 when he's killed. And this is Prince Hitendra, and he dies in 1920. So he's only 30 when he dies. So the boys are not very long lived, sadly. So the princesses here, or so the princess, this is Sudhira, and we have, again, these are photographs from the Maharaja's family, so it's using their naming. So again, Sudhira grown up, sometimes known as Granny Manda. So that is the Wittick Manor connection with the Manor family. And here we see Suniti Devi with her children, and we have the princesses on the right. So we have Pratibha and Sudhira there. And Sudhira, so the youngest one, so the little girl at the front with her dad there in one of his many motor cars. That's Granny Manda, that's a Princess Sudhira. And here she is. A lovely family photo there. I think it's a little bit cold there. So I don't know whether that's just cold, whether that's his motoring gear. And I think that's probably Dr. Sen, Suniti Devi's brother there. And this one, we have this from family, this was taken at Slough. So we have Pratibha and Sudhira over here. So Princess Pratibha, better known as Princess Pretty, and Sudhira there. And here she is all grown up. And her children. So we have Geeta in the background there. And Garbo, also known as Princess Manisha. And here she is a little bit older there, Princess Manisha. This was a family photograph sent to another member of the family, so it's addressed to Auntie Gurley, who I'm not quite sure who that is. So Pratibha in later life, so she marries an Anglo-Indian planter. And it's a cutting from the Bexhill Chronicle. This is the 27th of May, 1922. And there's a scandal. There is a divorce. And in this case, it's actually the princess who is divorced by her husband. So this is 1922. And sadly, she dies the following year. So she's only 32 when she dies in 1923. So she takes after her, the male side of her family. It doesn't have a very long life. So going back to the parents, so this is Maharaja Jitendra and Indira with all the children. And we have a lovely collection of photographs of their children. So if I've got this right, they have Menaka, Indra Jitendra, Ila, Jagadipendra, and Gayatri at the end. And going the other way around, we have Gayatri. So this is Gayatri Devi, Indra Jitendra, Ila, Jagadipendra, and Menaka. From Gayatri Devi, when she came down and very generously agreed to open our exhibition here in 1998, she presented the museum with this gold cigarette case. This was originally given by Nripendra Maharaja of Cooch Behar to Edward VII. And when Edward VII died, Queen Alexandra had it engraved with this message and then returned back to the family. So it was given to the king, and the king's wife then returned it to the Maharaja's family and very, very graciously returned it to Bexhill. So again, this was the original description from the Maharaja to the king, 9th of November, 1887. And this is a little press cutting from the opening of our exhibitions, the Bexhill Observer, 11th of September, 1998, recording that Her Highness Rajmata Gayatri Devi of Jaipur, the 80-year-old granddaughter of the Maharaja, is traveling from Jaipur to perform the opening ceremony. And here she is at the Delaware Pavilion with Heather Morey. So this was a really big event for us. And this is Garbo. So this is Princess Manisha with Heather and a younger version of myself at Galley Hill, looking at the table of orientation, trying to work out where everything is. From my recollection, it was a little bit too cold and a little bit too breezy for Gayatri Devi, so she stayed in the car at this time. So this is the opening event in the museum. So we have Garbo here, family very well connected. So another local celebrity is the actor Peggy Cummins. So she was in Gun Crazy and Night of the Demon. She very involved with charities in Bexhill, so local celebrity. She also came along to the event. And here is Gayatri Devi performing the opening of our Maharaja of Cooch Behar exhibition at Bexhill. So a great day in the history of the museum. So looking at some of the things we already had, we have this blotter. This was attributed to the Maharaja of Cooch Behar, and we are told that the inscription, this is Islamic inscription on the top, reads, "You either say something good or just keep silent." So some very sage advice there for the Maharaja's blotter. And we've acquired a number of things. Some of them acquired since the exhibition. We've got one of the gold wristwatches, which were presented to the station master of Bexhill. So that was his reward for, I guess, making sure that the train left on time. And this is a little label that I found in the museum's collection. It's got something slightly wrong. It's suggesting that the Maharaja was buried in Bexhill. His funeral was here, but he's certainly not buried in Bexhill. His ashes went back to Cooch Behar. But it's noting some of the other colonial connections of the town, of which there are a huge number. There's a very strong colonial feel to the town. There was a time when Bexhill was described as being largely inhabited by gouty colonels. The other feature is we had a huge number of schools, mostly independent schools. We've had over 200 schools in the history of the town. And this is the 1904 guidebook for Bexhill. This is the scholastic section, and it's talking about Thornbank School here, talking about it being specially adapted for Indian children. So again, from the Bexhill Guide of 1904. So we're providing education not just for Britain, but actually around the empire. So Bexhill almost as the empire's schoolroom. I'm not quite sure what it means, specially adapted for Indian children. I guess that just means that they turn the central heating up a little bit. But as well as the sort of the wealthy members of the family, if we just look at the normal townspeople, this is St Barnabas School. It's 19th October 1909, and we have this little chap here. So there are Indian members of the community that are not part of the wealthy members of society. These are normal residents within the town. So I'm not sure who that little lad is, but we know who this is. This is Driver T. Ramdin. This is 1915, so this is from the First World War. So there are people of Indian origin resident in the town at the time the Maharaja is coming and going. But these are Bexhill residents. These are not visitors. And there's a mention of other princes coming and going. So this is the Bexhill Chronicle, 1913. So there's another prince that's come down to go to school in Bexhill. So he's had a lovely time. He's just going back to India. And also, it seems rather strange. This is some of the Indian and foreign advertising for Bexhill. We're placing adverts all around. And so the Times of Ceylon there. So it says Indian advertising 1937, 1938. And again, this little cutting here from the Reuters Bulletin. The schoolroom of the South. For children, wonderful air, ultraviolet rays, pure soft water, safe sands. Egyptian Mail, Illustrated Weekly of India, Sunday Statesman. So this is some of our Indian advertising for just coming up to the Second World War. Not everybody had a great time here. This is cutting from the Bexhill Observer. This is the 30th of January 1937. Complaints by a Parsi father. This is complaints against Charters Tower School. He sends his daughter here and they say they're not feeding her properly. Well, maybe she didn't like the food very much. Can't really blame her. So other people visiting the town. So this is the Bexhill Observer from the 8th of November 1984, and this is Indira Gandhi's stay in Bexhill. I don't know what Gayatri Devi would have thought of that, because she locked her up for quite a while, so they wouldn't have got on. But there's a cutting here, and there's a little letter with Indira Gandhi talking about her stay in Bexhill. It was so windy, almost blew me off my feet when rounding a particular corner to my hotel, but I love the salt spray. So again, she's at university at this time. She's not very well, and her doctor recommends a stay in Bexhill to recover her health. And in this case, of course, it did work. So going back to some old pictures of the Maharaja Nrpender in his prime there. Less formally here. So a remarkable character, the source of many local legends, but much more interesting local history. So it's just a brief overview of the Maharaja and his family, their stay in the town, and all the stories that developed from it. So we have a number of things still on display associated with the Maharaja of Cooch Behar. So I hope you all come down and pay us a visit. Thank you very much.